Hello everyone, Dr. Christine Smith here, and I have a really awesome guest for you today, Dr. Emily, who is a DO, and she specializes in helping women with essentially dealing with high levels of stress and how that can start to affect your health in the world of things like autoimmune. So I'm going to go ahead and invite her on here. And I think sometimes it gets skipped over and people forget how intertwined these things can
I'm
be. Hi,
great. I'm
Dr.
great. It's
Emily,
great to
how
be
are you?
here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me. So, I was just telling everyone about you a little bit and how you kind of work with women who may be dealing with high levels of stress without actually realizing that they're in high levels of stress and how this can affect health. And I know even though you work mostly with women, everything we're going to be talking about applies to men and women, or really anybody, because we all share really similar physiology. So, why don't you just tell everyone a little bit about
Sure.
yourself, your own
Yeah.
work, and we'll
My
get
name is
rolling.
Dr. Emily Roedersheimer, and I am a family practitioner by trade. So I spent 15 years in family medicine, and then I found functional medicine. And I was able to use functional medicine on myself, which is a lot of us, we come to functional medicine because of our own story. So growing up, I had rheumatoid arthritis and on medications for most of my life. It's been since I was 10 when I was diagnosed. I was injecting myself with all kinds of medications. It was keeping it at bay for the most part, but I read an article about, from written by Dr. Hyman. A lot of us know who he is, and it was talking about how food can create inflammation. And I was like, what? What's this? And I'm well into my medical practice at this point, and had never heard this concept. So I was like, this is interesting. So he suggested trying to change your diet. So I went on a 10-day kind of elimination diet, and I could not believe it. My joints were so much better. I was actually able to get off one of my medications completely and reduce the dose of another one by like 50%. So this was life changing. Like, in my mind was like blown because I had all this medical training. I had no idea that my food was impacting me in this way. So then I went on a little bit of I had to learn everything. I was listening to every podcast I could get a hold of, and eventually went through my training with the Institute for Functional Medicine and left primary care because once you know a new way of doing things, you can't really stay in the old paradigm. It just didn't feel good anymore. So I have continued to work on myself. I don't take any medications. My joints are doing great. And so my goal is to just empower as many people as possible to know that your body can do this. We just have to find the right tools to help it out. And yeah, so I'm kind of on a mission to spread the word about functional medicine to as many people as possible.
I love that. Thank you. And like to think that you had symptom changes in 10 days, right? Guys, that's like a week and a half. Like anyone can shift their diet for that time. So that's pretty amazing because, RA, like that's not a small
I was
diagnosis at
10.
all. Especially what
Yeah. When I
age
was,
did you deal with that at? Oh, so
yeah.
you had
Yeah.
junior RA. That's like a whole other. Okay, so wow, what a amazing case to talk about because that means that there's hope for a lot of people because if you've been dealing with this since childhood, that means that your physiology is quite
It's so
adapted to
true.
it, yet you're
And
still
that's
able to
one thing
change
that
it.
I really find myself having to, a doctor now, I'm like holding the hope for my patients because they don't see it, right? And I'm sure you see the same thing. If you go to a rheumatologist or whatever kind of chronic illness you have, you go to the specialist, they don't really know that this can be reversed. Right. So as patients, we have no
Yes.
hope. I thought I was going to be injecting myself with these two medications for the rest of my life. I like really had no idea. So I like to hold the hope and just tell everyone that, obviously I can't make any guarantees, but things can get so much better.
Well, and I think that's really important, right? Because I have been through my own health experiences where, like, I've done my research and I've asked physicians who are leading in their field, like, hey, do you think this could work? And their answer is, no, that won't work. Instead of, I don't know if that will work. And I think the answer of no, that won't work is naive because to think that we know that much about the body and the brain and nature is kind of arrogant. So, yes, we know quite a bit, but to give a finite answer to anyone, I think is a little, yeah, oh, I don't know, kind
Yeah.
for lack of a better word, silly, because I think it's really helpful to, like, the wording that you work with clients with is so important, which leads us beautifully into our conversation. But I did see a little question earlier, and someone was asking, can this help
Mhm.
asthma too? I'm going to say yes, because basically what we're talking about is the most foundational things that you can do for your health. And I also study with the Institute for Functional Medicine, so we're buddies there, and I love it because
Really.
it's such an amazing community. So if anyone is like looking for a functional medicine doctor, just go to Google and type in IFM, find a practitioner. It will take you right to their page, and then you can literally look for a practitioner in your area who has been through this kind of training. And IFM is awesome because you end up getting a whole blend of different practitioners in it, and they've been creating this community for, gosh, over 20 years plus, more than that. And they were kind of some of the pioneers in this area of looking at the body as a holistic system and looking at the
Mhm.
foundations of care as lifestyle. And I think that they are kind of training the new generation of physicians. And there are other wonderful functional medicine programs too. And I study outside of IFM as well because I think depending on what you want to learn, you have to pull from a
Yeah.
lot of different areas. It's a lot of work to do functional medicine and to understand physiology in this complex way. But like, yes, changing your diet can absolutely work for asthma. It is well documented in the literature that asthma and gut health are very closely related. So let's dive into the lifestyle components a little bit. And you can, I mean, I guess we kind of spoke about how like this became your niche and like who you like working with. But I know one of your passions is how stress can affect autoimmune. So why don't we just start there
Sure.
and you can
Yeah.
kind of
And
give us your
that's
take on that.
stress was never something I set out to kind of really focus on, but the longer I was in practice, the more and more I saw the common thread among all of my patients that the stress was the thing. I could help them, like, most of them would be glad to change. I'll change my diet, I'll get some more sleep, but nobody was focusing on the stress piece, and I couldn't get them better. Right? If we have this chronic drive of stress that is not being looked at or addressed, it's just like we're trying to push a boulder uphill, and it's so hard. So yeah, thank
Can you also define how you think
gosh.
about stress as we
Well,
talk about
I
this?
think, stress, there's a lot of different forms of stress, right? There's, the good stress of like, well, I'm not sleeping, but I have this brand new baby and that's why. And then there's a lot, I think most people, most Americans would think of psychosomatic, psychological stress, the boss that's overbearing or the bad marriage or, those kinds of forms of stress. But stress can also come from imbalances in our blood sugar, we're going up and down all day with our blood sugar, that's stressing our system out, or infections or inflammation. Those are all things that are stressors on our body. And then there's past stress. This is what I see a lot also, is somebody who had a lot of stress in childhood or years ago, that's not currently a situation, but their body's holding on to all of that. Or they got trained in being in
Yes.
fight or flight at an early age, and they're still there, even though they don't need to be anymore. It sounds like you see that as well.
Oh gosh, yeah. And I've talked about this on different stuff before, but sometimes I'll get clients that come in and I'll just give kind of an example of like, how I spot this because I think you're right. A lot of people are in a stress state without realizing it because they've been living that way for decades. And I often will have someone come in. Sometimes, like, the stress is really obvious, right? But at least they're still connected to their body. When I have somebody come in and they're like very prim and proper and they sit down and they tell me about all this like crazy medical trauma, stressful things that's happened over the last 5 years with a totally straight face and like no emotional reaction at all. They're like, what do I do? And they're like so clear and collected and calm. And you wouldn't think of that as stressed. But to me, I read that as
Yes.
you are disconnected from your body. You are in a state of fight or flight where you have dissociated. So that is someone where I'll start with physical care to actually like get them back in their body through touch. And there's like a variety of techniques that I'll use to approach that because everyone's different and their body needs different things. And I collaborate with, other communities. Like there's a place in Denver called the Zen Den, and they use biohacking technology to help people get their body back into a state of presence. And then you can start to work with nutrition, and then you can start to talk to somebody about complicated labs. If I try to tell somebody about their physiology and the complexity of their labs when they're in a fight or flight state,
Mm.
it kind of goes like in one ear and out the other. And they just don't process it well. And they also don't process their nutrition well. So I can like sit there and throw supplements at them all day, but it's just like going straight through their system because your body's not focused on absorbing nutrition when it thinks it's running from a tiger, even if that tiger was something that happened when you're 6 years old. And this is the importance of processing emotions when you're actually on a healing journey, especially in the realm of autoimmune. And like in the reel that I used before this, just to let people know we're doing
Yes.
this talk, I mentioned Gabriel Mate, who I love. And he's written a book called When the Body Says No. And that book is all about how different personality types have
Mhm.
tendencies towards different autoimmune types. So I'm sure this is
Yeah.
something you
No,
see
I
too. So
love
I'd love
that
to
book.
hear your
It
thoughts on
was
it.
really eye-opening, and if any of the listeners should, I suggest they check it out. But it's so true, and I think it becomes so normal for people, like, normal that to feel stressed all the time that they don't even recognize it. It is
And it's
such
a
a
badge of honor in
I
America,
hate
which
it.
is
That
really
drives me
weird.
crazy. Yeah, yeah. We brag about how busy we are and all of that, and it's our society really just sets us up for the wrong attitude around it. But I love what you said about absorbing our nutrients. Like when we're in fight or flight, we're actually actively damaging our gut. We're tearing apart the gut lining to try to use it for fuel to get through that situation. And and that is how we get set up for autoimmunity.
Can you dive a little bit more into the physiology of that there? I love educating people
Sure.
on this, and I'd love to hear your take on it because I talk about it in my own way, but
Yeah.
I'd love to hear
So,
how you talk
the
about it.
term leaky gut is kind of a pretty common term. I know you've probably talked about that quite a bit, but intestinal permeability is this concept of the gut lining, which is this one cell layer thick lining between our intestinal contents. So the foods that we're eating, and on the other end, as it's being ready to be expelled. And then on the other side of that is our bloodstream and our immune system and everything there's this interface. And that one cell layer is very delicate. And if we damage it, then we allow things that are in the gut and supposed to stay in the gut to interact with our immune system. And so we get, for me, and this is not true for everyone, I don't know, I hate to make, broad assumptions, but gluten was damaging my gut lining and allowing my immune system to sense gluten proteins and get confused with the lining of my joints. So I was making antibodies to gluten proteins, and it was accidentally, attacking my joints. So if we can, and I didn't circle stress into all of this, but stress is one of the main things that creates a leaky gut. And so, looking at stress and really trying to address that and calm that down for ourselves in whatever way, shape, or form that is, will allow the gut to heal. It will bring that barrier back so that the foods that we're eating aren't, triggering our immune system to be hyperactive or overactive or get confused. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm I'm so glad that you're bringing this up because I think people forget that stress is a component, and I'll often work with, and in the past, before I understood it as well as this, it would be confusing because like I'd work with clients and be like, I'm doing all the right things. Like I am the healthiest person I know when it comes to food, but something is still wrong. And like, how do I fix it? And that's where it gets complicated. And, I love our counseling system. I have counselors I refer to all the time. I think it's a really important tool to be able to use and is like, I don't know, has an odd stigma in various places in the world, but I think it's amazing to have a third party to be able to help you work through your thoughts. But at the same time, sometimes we have to work with our own energy. And energy is different than verbalizing because sometimes you can verbalize yourself in circles. And I had a friend say once that words are clunky, and it's true. And English is a complex and confusing language. And if you like don't get the word exactly right, then the energy is kind of off. But that is where things like meditation come in, and why it can be important is because it's a way to start to shift your own energy and practice a new perspective. And I think that statement is one of the most important parts of this because stress is all about how you perceive your world. And this is why one person or two people can go through the same situation, and one person can end up with
Mm-hmm.
PTSD and another person doesn't. Because it's all about how they perceive the experience. And your perception creates the chemical cascade in your body. So if you're going through a stressful situation, but you don't allow yourself to perceive it as intensely as like being chased by a tiger, and you realize that like you'll figure it out and it's okay, then you might not have the same damage to your gut occur as that person who goes into freak out mode and is like, oh my God, it's the end of the world. And it's there's a blessing and a curse right here because the blessing is that we have now just taken the victimhood out of these conditions, right? And that's one of my struggles with how conventional systems approach this is they teach you that there's something wrong with you and that you must be fixed by something outside yourself that is often synthetic. And that's not always the case. It's like sometimes it really comes from the inside out, and you can start to heal your gut through things like meditation alone, and that's been shown in the literature. And so if the curse of it though is that we're challenging you to take
Right.
responsibility as a participant in the cause of your illness. And that is the challenging part. And I'm not saying that's easy, and I recognize how
Yeah.
hard it is, which is why I'm addressing it right now. But at the same time, it's a gift because you have now just been given your power back. So I'd be really curious to hear like how you approach this with your clients and
That's
kind of working around
everything.
those
I agree
mindsets.
100% with everything you just said. And you're so right. The exact same situation could be seen as a blessing versus, the end of the world to somebody. So it's all in how we look at it. And the chemical cascade, all of that. I agree so much on that. I try to come and meet my patient wherever they are, so some people, if I say the word meditation, they're completely turned off and they run for the hills, right? So sometimes we start with just like focusing on your breathing, or maybe it's a guided meditation or a guided mindfulness practice where you're just sort of scanning the body. I like a body scan as a way to drop in, like you said, that disassociation where it's like we have a brain and it's separate from our body. That's the power of functional medicine is we see it's all connected, and we know that what's happening in the brain is affecting the body, and vice versa. So, start wherever you are. If you've never meditated a day in your life, maybe you start with, 2 minutes on an app and listen to a guided sort of thing. If you've been at it for a little while, I love silent meditation, and just really sinking in and having like, and you've talked about this before, but like this peaceful, quiet place where all your thoughts and responsibilities and all the heaviness is just gone. Yeah. I liken it to the idea of, when you're at a swimming pool and there's like kids playing and everything, and then suddenly you go under the water and it's like quiet. I just love that. Yeah. That's the
Mm.
money spot for me. But so I think you have to start where you are, but noticing how you feel after 2 or 3 minutes of doing some breathing, or 2 or 3 minutes of a guided meditation, or sometimes it's just stepping outside, honestly, like for me is a nervous system reset. The fresh air, the birds, that all of the beauty of nature can really reset. So wherever you can, and I like to call them micro breaks. I have my patients schedule in, because who can't take 2 or 3 minutes, right? If you do not have 2 or 3 minutes a couple times a day to do these little resets, then you actually probably need 20 to 30 minutes, right?
That's exactly right. And I also want to present this concept just in case anybody hasn't heard of it. You can get addicted chemically to being stressed out. Like you really can because it's what your body considers homeostasis. And so now when you're in a calm, relaxed state, you actually feel unsafe and you feel uncomfortable
Yeah.
because it's not what your body views as normal. And if you've had, we'll just call it stress in your past of certain capacity, you may feel like you're no longer on alert
Mhm.
and you feel
That's so true.
irresponsible. And, and I think this is a really important thing to address because people don't realize you can get addicted to being stressed out. You can get addicted to being anxious. You can get addicted to being depressed because it becomes an identity and it becomes a chemical state in your body. And homeostasis means like what your body views as balance. It doesn't mean it's actually balanced. It
Yeah.
means it's what you've trained your body is balanced. And so by doing this kind of work, it's uncomfortable in the beginning, but it's so important for your longevity of your life and being able to not only live longer, but be
Mm.
mentally capable and present
That's so true.
into your
And
later years.
resilient, right, for what else is coming. I find that more of these stress practices we
Yes,
put in, even little pieces of them, then when something comes up, we're able to handle it, and it's not going to throw us for quite the loop it would have if we hadn't done any of this. So it's so important. I think everyone, and you're right, and it can be uncomfortable. So maybe starting slow, starting small, and knowing that it's okay to be uncomfortable a little bit at first.
definitely. And that's part of the training, right? Is like you're training yourself how
Right,
to be
right.
comfortable being uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
like that is the recipe for life. Like life is always going to make you uncomfortable in some way. And the way that you prevent yourself from like having a, we'll just call it like an overreaction and a stress cascade chemically is by how you perceive it. So if you have practiced being uncomfortable, when it happens, you know that you can handle it because you've already been there. And, with meditation, I think it's like really misunderstood. And like when I say the word meditation, people tend to think of like the monk sitting
For
on a
like an
mountaintop
hour or
cross-legged
two,
like
right?
this, right?
Yeah.
But the word, yeah, but like the word meditation to me is like akin to music. If you just say like I listen to
Yeah.
music, it's a really broad statement. So if you say I meditate, you're like talking about this umbrella of 8 billion different ways to do it. But really what it is it's like becoming present in your body or your environment or your mind and repetitively coming back to a certain point of focus in a state where your body feels safe enough to create. I think that's like the simplest way that I can put it. And that can be a walking meditation, it can be drawing, it can be sitting in silence, it can be listening to a guided one, it can be swimming under the water. Like whatever puts you in that flow state where you're present is a form of meditation. And then different forms of meditation have different benefits, just like different forms of exercise have different benefits. It is the gym for your brain, and you just pick what you want to do at the gym and you pick the area of your brain that needs exercise. And it
I love
might be overcoming your anxiety. So it might be
Yeah.
sitting there listening to all your anxious thoughts and quieting
I
them.
was just
And that
thinking
is your
before when we were talking,
practice.
like, when you first do bicep curls, that they don't feel good, right? They're a stressor on your system, but they make you ultimately stronger. So you're exactly what you're saying, like dealing with
Yes.
these, like the monkey mind, and like keep catching it and bring it back to stillness. Every time you do that, it's like the bicep curl for your brain. So it's not easy, but well worth the time and effort.
So I want to come back to like what because we're talking about tools, and then I want to talk about the physiology a little bit, and then we can kind of come back to how you maybe approach things with your clients and some of the tools you have them go through. But with the physiology, so she was talking about leaky gut and her body making antibodies to gluten and then accidentally attacking a form of tissue in the body. That's something called molecular mimicry. It's where your body accidentally gets confused. Now, there's a lot of research going on autoimmune because we don't fully understand it, and we're still coming to understand it. There are also theories around like oxidation in the body, which is almost like rust on a car, which can come from stress, can also come from toxins and other things, but stress and the chemical reactions can cause oxidation. And then it's like your immune system is trying to clean up the oxidation, and then it accidentally gets confused with your own cells being oxidized and then like interacting with your own cells. And then there's, the more esoteric component of it where it's like your energy is confused, therefore your immune system is confused. And this is the idea of energetic coherence, and why meditation or biohacking technologies that help you like get back into your body and get into a calm state can be really important, because they help with your energetic frequency, your energetic signature, your energetic coherence. And this is stuff that like Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about. And so I'd be curious, when it comes back to like the autoimmune component, like what are some of the causes and relationships between stress and
Well,
autoimmune on a
I think
physiological
you just
level?
nailed some of them on the head there, right? Yeah.
Cool. Yes, or however
Yes.
you like to talk about them. Like, I'd love to just hear your thoughts, since
Sure,
you
sure.
work
I
with
mean, I
this like
think
primarily.
that I usually start, my main focus is on the gut because, we in our training we've learned like so much of our foundation of our health is in the gut. So healing the gut, the leaky gut, getting rid of infections, all of that sort of thing, the way that the food is impacting the gut health, all of that is really, really helpful. But then looking at those things that might be causing oxidation or that rusting that you mentioned, things like toxins, those are prevalent, quite prevalent in our world. And so where can we remove toxins? And are you drinking filtered water? And what are your beauty products like? And all of that sort of thing. So, we're looking for removing different sources of stress in that way, like all those different types of stress.
So I actually like that you just mentioned that, right? So we were talking about mental stress, but there's also like physical stress, there's nutritional stress, there's toxic stress. So all of these play into our health.
Sure.
Beautiful. Thank you. I just wanted to hear your take on that. So when it comes to like working with your clients, so we kind of just talked about like, you might initially talk to them about their gut and their diet, but what's the process that you tend to take them through, and maybe even helping someone realize that they're dealing with stress when
Yes,
they don't
yes.
always
I,
realize
I
that they
can
are.
pick up on it often in someone's story, just as they're talking or telling me their history. What I find really, really interesting, and this is one of the things that we learn in our training in functional medicine, is, if somebody says, okay, so I was diagnosed with X, Y, or Z, and it was this date, right? Then we look at what was happening before that, right? And what so often, and this is again how I got really into helping people with stress, is that almost always there was some major stressor in their life right before their autoimmune diagnosis, whether it's a divorce, loss of a job, parent died, all car accident, like lots and lots of different things. It can be any sort of stress, can even be good stress, like your job got super busy because it was going really well, but you weren't sleeping because you were working so much. So any
Or maybe
there
you
you
ran
go.
an ultra
Definitely. Yeah.
marathon.
So that's what we do. We look backwards and kind of we look at someone's timeline, right? So how their life has kind of progressed from a medical standpoint, and we look at what happened or what was preceding the start of the symptoms to kind of find a really and then I can usually discuss that, like, wow, that happened. And there's like often not a connection, right, for the person, like, wow, I didn't even realize like my mom died, and then 3 months later my joints are swollen. Like there's so I'll help people see that sometimes just from their story. I think one of the most powerful tools I have is the salivary cortisol testing. I have so many women or patients in general that don't see the stress or don't think they're stressed. This doesn't apply to me, and then I show them in black and white the results of their testing, and they can't argue. It's like these light bulbs, you can see it happening, and they're like, wow, like this is affecting my body. And I think that's why in traditional medicine there's not much talk about, like, the traditional doctors aren't talking about stress, because they don't really have tools, or they don't know how to use the tools that we're using to kind of look at someone's stress response. So that, I think that's probably one of the most powerful things, but often you can find it in their story.
Yep. And I'm so glad you mentioned salivary testing, because I think, part of why I do this on this channel is just to educate people
Yeah.
so they know what questions to ask. And like, you can do a blood test for cortisol, but it's a snapshot in time, and it's not super telling. So one of the benefits of like salivary testing for hormones, not just cortisol, but like overall, is it shows over a period of time how your body is processing that
Mhm.
hormone and what your cells are doing with it, not just how much is floating around in your blood. So, in functional medicine, we'll use a ton of different kinds of testing. And I love what you said about like taking a good history too. I think that's one of the foundational components of functional medicine is learning how to ask the right questions. And I have people ask me often, like, how do I find a good functional medicine doctor? I'm like, well, they should be asking you a
A
lot of
lot.
questions when you come in, and they should not
Right.
be dismissing anything. Like their intake form should take you a little while. And yeah, lots of questions. And then they should be able to explain the physiology of like what's going on and why they want to do what they want to do. And I think some of the critical thinking can sometimes get lost in the conventional model. And, and I know this wasn't like, or I have a question for you, and you can kind of answer it in whatever way you want. It wasn't one that we pre-discussed, but I think it's important because I'm sure people wonder this. Why is it difficult to be a functional medicine doctor in the primary care model,
Yes,
and why did you
that's a
switch?
pretty loaded question, but I loved my primary care days. Because I felt very connected to my patients. I'm always doing it for the patient and the connection. But it was very much, the model is you have hypertension, here's your pill. You have high cholesterol, here's your pill, here's your insulin for your diabetes, and I'll see you next time. And then I went to my training in functional medicine. As I'm learning, like there's so much more to do, like so much, right? Like I had 15 minutes to talk to people. So yeah, yeah, I found myself
You're
handing out like
handcuffed, yeah.
handouts left and right. Read this, do that, like it, and it landed for maybe 5% of the people that I talked to. And I found that when those 5% of people came back in and said, guess what? I looked at that handout you gave me and I changed how I'm eating and look, my blood sugar's better. Like that made my whole day. And then it got to be like, I need to be working with the people that can use the tools that I have and the tools that resonate with me now. I no longer felt good about just passing out the medications because I knew there was something else that could be done. Not that there's something wrong with sometimes we need medications, but I would like that to be sort of the, when all else fails, we use a medication. And I just love the idea in my training as a DO, seeing the body as a whole, correcting the imbalance, and you have a similar training and background too. So it really didn't sit well with me anymore to just be passing out prescriptions all day. And I had this new tool that I was dying to use.
I think, thank you for sharing that. I wanted to bring this up because I think a lot of physicians are in your position where it's like they actually know a lot of stuff, but they're limited in what they have the capacity to do or are allowed to do or are instructed to do. And it's a funky position to be in. So I just, for all the physicians out there, like just my heart goes out to you and just keep doing the right thing and keep doing your best. And, to anyone who is in, because I think also our society has gotten trained in this model of, well, if it's not covered by insurance, I'm not going to do it. But at the same time, you'll spend $8 on a
For
cup of
sure.
coffee. So, if you were to take all of your cups of coffee over the year, that would very
Right.
much pay for your functional medicine. And so it's just like just taking things like that into account. I'm saying this because it is subconscious and people don't realize that they're stuck in this model. So it's like I kind of view
Yes.
insurance as being like for emergencies, and I view the rest of my healthcare as my responsibility. And I also understand that people are in financially strained situations, which is why I do this and I do free education, because the majority of the time what I'm doing with clients is I am educating them about their own physiology so that they can
Yes.
mostly take care of themselves at home. And then maybe the other stuff we do, if it's like a really complicated case, is we do some lab testing and we work with some nutritional supplements to get their body in the right place. And then they're
Right.
still responsible for their health afterwards because it's not a destination, it's a system that we're maintaining. So the more I can educate patients, which you
No,
can't
at all.
do in 10-minute appointments. You just can't. Like, I can't even fully educate you guys the way I like to on here, which is why I make like an online course that takes you through like a month of what I'd be telling patients in our initial appointments anyway, to make it accessible for people, especially people in a financially strained position. So just know that like that's what we're working on in these positions, is making this kind of stuff more accessible for people, because I think this is
Sure.
the
And I
evolution
would
of
just
healthcare.
chime in that the
So,
more and
yep.
more draw there is for this, then the insurance companies are going to have to start listening, right? Yes, yes,
Yes. Vote
yes.
with your
And
dollar.
but you're so right. Like if we are leaning on the insurance companies, we're gonna be just going down the pill for every ill, and there's not a lot of quality of life there. So I'd much rather pay now for my good health that's going to last forever than end up, in a nursing home or with cancer or whatever, because I didn't put the investment in now.
Yes. So view it as an
Yes.
investment in yourself and in your future, and an investment for your family. Because a lot of people, I'd say, probably commonly moms too, have a hard time investing in themselves. But if we frame it as you're investing in your children and you being able to be there for them and to not be a burden
Yeah.
on them later, all of a
Yeah.
sudden you're like,
And
oh, okay, this actually
them,
makes
right?
sense. So thanks. I know that.
And to have patience with our children. If
Say
we
that
feel
again.
sick, if we're exhausted all the time, if we're stressed out of our minds, we are not. I know personally, I'm not a very patient mom in that setting. Yeah.
It makes you a better parent. It makes you a better partner. It makes you a better friend. Like, taking care of yourself and being in your best state. Like, I try to train my patients, like, I don't want you to eat well to be thin and pretty. I want you to eat well
Yes.
because it's good for you
Yes.
and you view your body as a temple, and it's an opportunity to be
Yes.
able to eat well. Like, that's a privilege. And so, and I know, for people in food deserts and stuff, like that's a thing, but it's there are different solutions and different
Mhm.
things. You can have food mailed to you. There's so many different healthy food services where you can
Yes.
literally have a box mailed to your door of healthy things you can cook for the week. So just know, like, and it's like it's not that much more expensive than grocery shopping. Like, they're fairly similar. So it's just
Mhm.
about like voting with your dollar. Pay for
Yeah.
what you want to see in the world. It's that, similar to the
Right.
Gandhi quote, like, be the change you
Mhm.
want to see. So
That's okay.
anyway,
Love
thanks.
it.
I know that was a bit of a tangent, but I think it was important. So I guess, when it comes back to like the stress and autoimmune component, what do you think is important for people to know about autoimmune that often gets
Well, I
skipped over?
think and we've talked about it a little bit about empowering people and not feeling like a victim. But I think the thing I want to say is that not seeing yourself as the disease, not identifying. So many patients come to me and they're like, I have X, Y, or Z, and they see themselves as that's who they are. I can think of a couple patients, particularly like multiple sclerosis. Like like, this is my life. This is, like sign on the dotted line. This is how it's going to go. I'm going to decline and decline. And it doesn't have to be that way, And so just knowing that because you have an illness, you still have this amazing body that is so powerful and has this innate healing ability that we can tap into and at any time change the trajectory, right? Like I lived with rheumatoid arthritis for 30 some years before I was able to turn it around. And now it's no longer who I am, so just not identifying and saying, this is a hurdle, this is an obstacle I'm dealing with. How can I, what can I do? How can I change this? And not seeing it as your death sentence or how your life is going to be ongoing.
I think that's super important. And, this is where like you can start to play
Mm-hmm.
with meditation. Like, yes, meditation can be playful and creative, but you can start to play and have conversations
Yes.
with your cells and with your immune system, and like go inward and talk to them and be
Yes.
like, hey, we're not under
Yes.
attack. It's okay. Like, you can come off of the defense. Like, and like, I would really like to rebuild this myelin sheath in my brain. Can you do that,
Yeah.
please? And like, you don't even have to know physiology, right? It's the intention and the energy behind it, and you telling your
Mhm.
body what you want it to do. And, for some people who have followed my channel know, like my body was in a place at one point where like I was allergic to everything, like food,
Oh,
supplements, B vitamins. Like I couldn't, as a functional medicine doc, I couldn't use nutrition to help myself. So I turned to deep meditation. And, that just happened to be Dr. Joe Dispenza's work. There's a lot of other work out there, but he's cool because he's also heading a lot of the research in this realm, and he's partnering with
yeah.
UCSD. So like it's real, like this stuff is happening. And he has had a ridiculous amount of spontaneous recovery stories. And I went to like when I was, first kind of, I mean, I've been following him for like 10 years, but when I first went to one of his events, it was like a 3-day event. I literally watched like a horrible rash I was dealing with disappear in like
That's
less than 48 hours from just meditating deeply and having a conversation with my body and changing my perception of not being
right.
under attack by the universe and not being on the defense. And it was my own mental perception that was instructing my immune system. And this is why I think how you speak to patients as a practitioner is so important, because even like I had some dental work done, right? And he was like, oh, like that was a really deep thing. And you might have some sensitivity, and if this doesn't work, then we're gonna have to do a crown and blah blah blah. And I turned to him, I was like, what do you
Oh,
want to happen?
that's
And he
awesome.
kind of looked taken aback, and he was like, oh well, I want this to heal this way under the limestone. And I was like, great, that's what I'm gonna focus on. I've had zero pain,
That's so
zero issues. So ask. I like that. So it's like if you're working with a physician and they're
good.
telling you all the things that might happen that are bad, ask them what their ideal outcome is and what would happen, and then put your energy there. And it's amazing what
That's
your
so
body can do when
powerful.
you have the right intention.
I love that. And unfortunately, I feel like a lot of patients don't feel empowered enough to speak like you did. We should. I mean, it's our body, right? And we should feel empowered to say what we need to say. But that's so true, because we always hear the long litany of what could go wrong. And no, in generally in conventional medicine, no one's talking about what could go right. And that's, if you don't believe that it's going to change, it's not going to change. So that's,
Yep. And I think, when it comes to quote unquote challenging your physician, I don't think you need to
yeah,
do it in a way that's challenging to them. I just asked him, I was like, what's your ideal outcome?
yeah.
So like you can ask
That's
that question pretty innocently. And also like if your physician gets really offended by you like asking questions, and I don't know,
yeah,
like I think it's okay for you to ask questions. I'm just going to give you that permission, and I think you should be able
agree.
to in our system. So, find someone that you vibe well with, that you feel nurtured by and cared for by, and like you're allowed to go doctor shopping, just like you can go
Sure.
shopping for any other thing that
Yeah,
you need.
yeah.
So, yeah, that's
Good
just an
reframe.
option. Beautiful. Thank you. So, and I guess kind of as we wrap up here, do you have like any last things that you want to share with people, or anything that you're working on that you want them to know about? And
Yeah,
then we'll kind of go into how
sure.
can they find you if
I
they
think
would
I
like
would
to
just
work with
say
you.
that, if this interests you at all, if you're, if, I mean, obviously following you, that the people listening have some interest in changing their health. And I would say it is well within your power and your ability to make extreme positive changes. And it doesn't have to be big and expensive. Like you said, like there's a lot of lifestyle changes and looking into meditation and sleeping a little bit more. They are free, and
They're
I
they're
talk about them all
free.
the time. So, I think the foundation of our health is lifestyle. And if we can get so actually, that's a little side note. In my practice, about a year and a half ago, I switched the setup of my practice. That as patients came in, they didn't work with me initially. They saw my health coach for the first 3 months. And the reason I did that is because initially the lifestyle is where it's the low hanging fruit. It's where all the bang for our buck is. And so often by the end of 3 months, the patient doesn't see me. Like they're good. Uh, yeah. And you're familiar with the MSQ, but
Yes.
we have this medical symptom questionnaire that we have patients fill out, and they rate their symptoms, and the higher the score, the worse you feel. And across the board, at least a 50% reduction in symptoms after 3 months with a health coach, which is truthfully just working on the lifestyle piece. So, and it's great if you could get a health coach. You don't need a health coach if you're watching Dr. Christine and picking up on all of her tips. Lots of this information is free. So dive into that, and you really do have a lot of power. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a great model. I really like that model. And I like what you said, where it's like sometimes we don't even need to do the testing if you just like make these changes. And, and I know like Dr. Emily has her own programs and stuff that she's working on. And if you guys feel like you need some assistance, but you're not really ready to like jump in with a practitioner or a group program yet, you can check the link in my bio. And it's like, I designed a 5-week course to teach people what I teach them in like our first couple months of appointments for you to do at home. And you can see how well you do and if you still need help after that, because it's more about teaching you how your body works. So is there anything that you're working on that you want people to know about?
If anyone wants to find me, my practice is Balanced Living Functional Medicine, and it's balancedlivingfm.com is my website. You can sign up for my newsletter. I've got 2 different newsletters a month that go out. Lots of this kind of information in there. I'm at the beginning stages of writing a book, and so maybe I'll come back when it's ready, but it's all about how our bodies are speaking to us, and we need to try to listen, and the wisdom there. So I'm super like, that's where my jam is right now. So, but I'd love for people to sign up for my newsletter, or my Instagram handle is at Balanced Living FX Med. So thank you so much for having me on here. It's been an honor.
Oh, yeah.
We do.
No, thank you. I think we share a lot of the same values, and it's always fun to talk nerdy physiology with somebody. So thanks for accommodating my nerd. But I can't wait for our next conversation.
All right,
And
thank you.
yeah, thanks
Bye-bye.
for your time.